You shall witness. What's up, Book Talk? Last night I finished House of Chains, the fourth book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series by Steven Erikson. And while I overall liked it, and I think it's a good book, it is probably my least favorite Malazan book so far, so let me get straight into it, no spoilers. First of all, I think part one of this book is easily its strongest part by quite a margin, at least for me personally. I think the introduction of Karso Orlong, and this is not giving anything away by the way, is one of the greatest character introductions ever. And his entire quest, not through just part one, but this entire book, and how he changes as a person, is really something to witness. Um, but yeah, I really, really like the Karsa Orlong plotline throughout this. I think part one for me was the strongest part of this entire book. And honestly, I just wish that Steven Erikson would do it more often with what he did with this entire character. Because the first part of this book is a singular point of view, third person, and we're just going through what he's experiencing. And then we get back to the normal Malazan ways, which is, multiple character points of view, multiple lines and all that. But it was kind of nice, that switch of pace. I also really like the Absolar and Crocus plotline throughout this entire book. Um, I've learned to love these characters over time, and I honestly thought they had some of the best moments throughout. There's also Kalam Mekar, who is, if you've read these books, you're familiar with him. He's great in this. He shows back up. Fiddler also shows back up, and he is also great. There's a bunch of very interesting stuff going on with the Malazan army here because it's not your typical Malazans that you're used to necessarily. It's not the bridge burners, and it's like a whole new group of people. And for me personally, I just haven't connected with them yet. There was one character I really liked, and I thought the way that his story was written throughout was really good, especially his conclusion, or how the story concluded for now. But overall, there was a lot in here in this book where I just wasn't super, it's not badly written, and I think for a lot of people they'll connect to it. I just personally didn't. So the cons for me are the whirlwind plotline throughout this. Just kind of sitting in camp and learning about camp politics and how we sometimes have to deal with evil because it prevents greater evil from occurring, or at least getting in our personal way. I get what Erikson is going for with the whirlwind plotline overall and what he's setting up. I just thought it was I just didn't care about any of the whirlwind characters, honestly. I didn't care about Felison anymore because it feels like she's just become a completely different character who I have a really, really hard time sympathizing over until basically the last portion of this book. And every other character out inside the whirlwind plot line, except for one or two, just did not interest me. There were still some great moments in this plot line, but I wasn't enthralled by it like I normally am with the Malazan books. Usually every plot line for me is, there's always one I like the most, but all of them I feel like usually I'm really invested in, but this book I just wasn't really invested in everything that was going on. I feel the same way about the Malazan plotline. I didn't really care about most of the characters except for two or three, and overall I just was ugh. I just didn't feel very into this book as much as I did Memories of Ice. But also coming off the Memories of Ice high is, that sets your expectations super high. And then, a lot of people think that House of Chains is very divisive among the Malazan fan base because some people have it as their absolute favorite, and there are people who have it as their absolute least favorite. So far, I'm in the latter camp. It's my least favorite so far. I don't know if it'll be my least favorite in general, but out of the ones I've read so far, this is the one I've liked the least. I think it's better written than Gardens of the Moon. I think its pacing makes more sense. The point of views don't switch as often, etc., stuff like that. But for me, what actually happens in the story, what actually happens with characters, and the overall plot of this book just didn't quite click, and it felt like a really disconnected book compared to Memories of Ice, which was like almost the grand conclusion of everything that was set up in Gardens of the Moon. Whereas this is supposed to be the grand conclusion of everything set up in Dead House Gates. And for me, it just did not deliver on that, especially the ending when the Whirlwind and Malazan sides meet. I mean, the action is really great, right? But the resolution to these two characters who have been opposing one another, and if you've read this book, you know who I mean, just felt incredibly underwhelming to me. It just kind of happened, and you're like, oh, that's it. I know a lot of people are like, no, that's actually a really sad moment, but I didn't feel that way at all. I did not feel disheartened or anything like that at all while reading House of Chains. I mean, this book is pretty grim, but the conclusion is not nearly as sad as people made it out to be. And for me, I didn't feel anything, to be honest. There are some other plot lines. I liked Troll Sangar. I liked Onrak, the Broken. I like those guys. There are a lot of great characters in this book, but overall, I was less keen on this one. It still has the great world building. It still has great characters. It still has great plot moments and everything in between that you come to expect from Malazan. But for me, overall, this is just a weaker book. This is kind of just wrapping up a story that I wasn't super invested in to begin with Dead House Gates. You know, the reason I loved Dead House Gates was Coltane and the Chain of Dogs section, and that didn't really have anything to do with this book. This was more so wrapping up the Whirlwind plot line, and I just wasn't super invested. I guess I'll just have to see how this connects to the rest of the story, but right now I just don't see those connections personally. I mean, I see a few, but I just don't know like exactly where they're going. Yeah, so overall, I like this book. I think it's a good fantasy book, but I didn't love it like I loved Dead House Gates or like I loved Memories of Ice, and I liked it less than Gardens of the Moon. Still a good book, still a great read if you're really into Malazan. I highly recommend it. But, I would say if you've finished Memories of Ice, just lower your expectations a little bit. Just go in with this opinion that it's going to be way more Dead House Gates and its, like, conclusion than Memories of Ice. And I think you'll probably be better off than I was. Overall, though, still good. I'm going to give it an 8.3 out of 10, and I'm looking forward to Midnight Tides, which is apparently much, much better. So I'm pretty excited.